that is just mind-blowing for me, because in Pennsylvania, and even in Philadelphia, there's a million people that are practicing. So for an entire country, that's just shocking. We have just a handful of psychologists and a few social workers. And there's one inpatient mental health facility, which, again, very shocking statistics, and it has like 80 beds. And as you can imagine, the clinical care isn't the best. And it's no fault of their own, it's just a lack of knowledge when you talk about education, lack of education around it. So, you know, Liberia, really, they recognize this as an issue, and what they've done is they developed a national mental health policy, which basically, in this policy, they address that, you know what, we do have some mental health issues that need to be addressed, and there are stigmas around them. And they talked about, you know, ways in which we can integrate mental health into the primary health system, and basically at free of cost, and that things would be confidential. And the focus really of this policy is on, you know, training, educating, and credentialing multidisciplinary teams to work in the community and in outpatient settings. So, the question for us now, though, is how do we address this? Like, what can we do as the youth of Liberia to make sure that we're addressing some of these issues? And I'll briefly go over them. One of the things that we can do is basically dispel mental health stereotypes. You know, let people know that the stereotypes aren't really true, and educate them about mental health. Another thing you can do is, if you are experiencing a mental health issue, you can seek treatment, or if you know someone who is, you can encourage them to seek treatment as well. You can also get support or be a support. You can volunteer in mental health organizations just to get experience and understand what that process is like. And then another thing that we can do that's specific to Liberia are the following things. We can study or major in the field. We really, really need people that are in that field. And I know I talked to Ms. D earlier, and she's into psychology. And, you know, study the field and take your expertise back home and contribute. You can join healthcare organizations. You can take medical missions trip to Liberia. I know I will be taking one in March of next year, just to be able to give back and contribute to our communities that give us so much. You can donate to mental health organizations. That's something that I'm big on, and I encourage you guys to do so as well. And you can create your own, you know, mental health education prevention program. Really, and most importantly, I want you to be able to think of new creative ways to kind of bridge the gap in our system. Here's a list, I won't go over them, of just partners and donors of Liberia, and you can always research them. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, you know, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing is changed unless it is faced. So I really encourage you guys, strongly encourage you guys, to be able to think of ways in which we can bridge the gap in our Liberian healthcare system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simmons. And moving forward, we're going to have our next speaker, Mrs. Zoe Butcher-Washington, speaking on culture.
Okay, greetings everyone. So I'm Zoe Butcher-Washington, and I was asked to speak on culture today. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here to speak to the youth of Liberia, and also be a part of this historic summit that we're doing today, and hope to be here again next year when we put it on again. The biggest thing that I would want everyone to just think about right now is, what is culture? What does culture mean to each and every one of you? And I know that you have cards with you, so as you think about that, probably just jot down some notes so that when we break up into our groups, we can discuss, okay? For me, when I was asked to speak on this topic as well, I had to think, what is culture? It's something that I think is so innate to us that as we interact each and every day in our lives and feel, oh, we know what culture is. You know, we're Liberian. That's our culture. What we eat, what we wear, how we talk, you know, how we interact with others. So thinking about culture, you might have another group say, culture is probably just literature, It's music, it's art. Talking to a biologist or someone in medicine, culture might be some microscopic organisms in a petri dish. So think about what culture means, okay? My goal today is just to raise awareness about culture so we can talk about it a little bit more. So if we take a look at it from a textbook standpoint, and just quoting one of the key anthropologists in this field, Tyler, culture is made up of, in his definition, culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, our belief, art, law, morals, customs, and any capabilities and habits acquired by humans as member of society. Okay? Just hearing that definition, it tells you right away that culture is powerful. It's a powerful human tool for survival, no matter where you are. It goes on to just break down a little bit more, 3 different layers of culture. So the first layer being the one that we're probably used to. Oh, it's our tradition. It's what we do, you know, how we act, the language that we speak. First basic level, in a sense. There's a second level of culture that I feel is a little bit more complex and probably touches on why we're here today. It's that subcultural piece. So as immigrants move to different countries, the US, move to London, Australia, you have your culture that you have learned, it's your belief, it's your art, it's knowledge, but then you are dropped into this bigger, I would say a little bit more diverse culture as in the US. Now you're here, you're with people from Vietnam, you're with people from China, from South America, and you're a Liberian, you are here. So how do you continue to maintain your Liberian culture as well as try to learn, well, what's going on in this new environment that I've been put in, okay? For second layer of culture. The third layer of culture that is kind of mentioned is a cultural universal. So these are things that are innate to all humans everywhere in the world, all humanities, all cultures, I would say, individually, and they're basics. Like in all cultures, certain things that you find that individuals will adorn themselves in some sort of jewelry or dress. They usually raise their children in a group with other groups. There's usually a leader identified in each sort of cultural group or human group, okay? So with that being said, it's more of the second one, the subcultural piece, that I just wanted to touch on a little bit more. So with that, it leads us to this idea of acculturation. So for the psychologists in the house, you guys are probably more familiar with this term acculturation, but for the overall youth, the community, I myself as a businesswoman, I was like, acculturation, let me think about that a little bit more. What does that mean? So in doing that, it states the process of adaptation of new conditions of life. That's one definition. The second definition that came across was changes that occur in members of a minority group in contact with another dominant culture. So acculturation for immigrants and anyone who's moving to a different area is very, very important. It's something that you must go through in order to be successful, but it's not something that you can go through alone. Okay, so as we move from Liberia and move throughout the world, we have our strong Liberian culture. Majority of the time, we're going to be dropped and infused into another diverse, dominant culture. How do we survive? What do we do? I think it's key to understanding how we bridge the gap. When you think about the definition of culture, it's here, it's in your mind. It's what you've learned, what you believe, how you feel. It's important, I would say, that you continue to love your culture, understand it, but also be open-minded when you move into these different societies of what's going on, how are people surviving. So as you're in the US, what are some things that I need to learn in order to be able to get a job, get the education, understand how this culture interacts with mine? I think it's important, and that's where you see a lot of the Liberian communities springing up. That's a great place to say, let's group together like we're doing together now as Liberians, but let's also understand that we are a part of this greater whole. So when you meet individuals like Dean sitting over there, who we are now in his environment in a sense, how do you interact with Dean and to have him be a catalyst for you to understand this American culture that you're in? But oh no, don't let Dean get off the hook like that by just taking his culture and understanding it and say, oh, I may have to change something. You want to also let Dean know what's up in Liberia, what's up with the food, how are people interacting, what are the key beliefs of Liberia. So I think it's important for you to always be able to give back. Culture as a whole and acculturation as we learn it is a two-way street. And I think that's where our power for our culture is key. So for instance, if you're taking a look at Nawali, who's sitting down at the bottom, she's a professional cultural dancer. So in California and all over the US, as she's showcasing the beautiful Liberian culture with everyone and getting all of the West African dances, she's also training young individuals in those communities who are not necessarily Liberian about the power and the beauty of the Liberian culture. You have the same thing with Mrs. Koto up on the stage. As she's in this tough industry, which I'm also working in, but she's in a very tough industry, and as she designs, she's showing the world, she's showcasing the Liberian culture to the world. People at the Yap Corporation who never even knew about Liberia, they know her name, and they say, oh, I saw somebody from Liberia, you know, on Project Runway, and they're talking about it. But it's that showcasing and that confidence of culture that's important for all of us as Liberians. So the biggest thing for me today, for you guys to remember, is let's love our culture. Let's remember what our culture is. Let's take every opportunity to connect with our communities and our leaders in our communities and feel proud of our culture. But one thing we cannot forget is let's remember where we are at any given time in the world. Let's try to be open-minded between our parents, our youngsters, what's going on in the culture where you are. Don't be afraid of it. Understand how you can utilize it. Find volunteers who can help you through your community, because understanding the culture of a new country as the U.S. is not something you can do on your own. You have to be open to volunteers. So at the end of the day, we're all one Liberian group. We're made up of multiple ethnic groups, which is our beauty and what we showcase. So let the Liberian culture bind us. The culture that binds us, let it also sustain us. And as we work to bridge this gap globally, let's understand it's all of our responsibilities and be proud of who we are as Liberians. And also make sure we showcase that at any given time, anywhere we can, in a positive way. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Zoe Butcher Washington. And next we'll have our speaker on social network and technology, Ms. Kosomo Mobile.
Come on, you guys want to talk about social media? You're thinking about your health and your culture now and your education. Well, all those things definitely come into play. We live in a world now where you go and you meet somebody and they say, hey, I'm Kosomo Mobile, I'm a professional doctor, and I do this and I do that, and as soon as they turn their backs, you can Google them and find out if they're telling the truth or not. That is the world we live in right now. So it's good and it's bad. You know, now we have to be accountable for the things that come out of our mouths, the things that we lie about and stretch a little bit, because people can Google you now. Once your name is imprinted in any website or YouTube or article or in a newspaper, someone can take your name and find out who you are, what you do, even where you live and how you live. It really became important to me about social media when I came on Project Runway, and my husband had a Facebook page at the time. I think I was on MySpace. May that soul's rest in peace. And I just remember thinking, you know, I don't really have time for it, but as, you know, things grew with the show and people were trying to contact me, I said, you know what, I'm gonna open up a Facebook page and I'm gonna see how I can use this to just socialize with my friends. I heard people talking about they were finding their friends from Liberia. So it was just something fun for me to do until the day came where I think somebody had posted like a picture from an event that I did, and it just showed like a lot of crazy stuff going on. And even though I was at the event and I hosted it, I felt like it almost like it represented me, it reflected who I was, this picture on my Facebook page that had nothing to do with me. So at that time I really started thinking about what this social media extravaganza was all about and how it was spreading. At the time it was Facebook, then it went to Twitter, now we have Instagram and Pinterest and Tumblr and YouTube and all these other things that you can be on. But at the end of the day, I think on social media that we are involved with, it represents you. When you walk into a room, if somebody doesn't know who you are, like for instance, if you walk in the room and I look at you, I'm already prejudging you. I'm already thinking, okay, he's probably this. And until I actually get to talk to you and speak to you, I'm not going to know who you are. But now we have Facebook. If I don't know you, I just hear your name, I can go on your Facebook page and judge you by who you're following, who you're tagging in your pictures, who you're, commenting on with comments. Those things represent who you are now. Now I'm actually really judging you because I'm like, wow, he hangs out with so-and-so and they're doing what? So all these things now represent you, your personality, and your image. I think we have to look at social media and the technology we have now as our imaging. Who do you want people to know who you are? What do you want people to know about you when you walk into a room or when they look at your Facebook page? Now I've actually scaled back so much that I'm really conscious about who I'm following, who I'm retweeting, who I am asking to be friends with, because I think those things represent who I am. And when people look at my pages, I want them to see, hey, she knows so-and-so, and find people that are in like situations as you are, people who aren't. I follow Oprah Winfrey. I don't know her, but I love what she stands for. So following her, or Joyce Meyer, people that I feel like are great representations of who I would like to be seen as, those are the people I want to be affiliated with. And sometimes I think when you speak out of your mouth and what you envision for your future, it can come to be. I think right now we look at it as Twitter especially. You can be friends with Shaquille O'Neal, and you can be friends with all your basketball wife friends, and so and so and so. So talking to people who are doing things that you might want to do in your life that seems so impossible are so easy now. You can talk to them. You can say, hey, I love you on the show. I love what you did. You can instantly be a part of these people's lives. So I think when you're looking at your friendships and who you're following, bringing certain people into your atmosphere creates that vision board, of who you want to be. It's like picking your friends. The group that you follow, that represents who you are. So even though you might be an upstanding citizen and you're doing great things in your community, you might just have one friend who drinks a lot and goes to parties and always in fights, and all they're going to do is say, well, that's so-and-so's best friend. They now represent who you are. So I think we need to be careful with our imaging on Facebook and really try to scale back down. How many people have a Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube? And how many of you have integrated all those sites into one collaboration? A few people. How many of you just use it for personal reasons or for business, for your personal businesses? I think it's important when you're doing that, when you do have a business and you do have a personal life, you almost have to come to the point now in our society where you have to separate it, or you have to just not even do it at all. Because you can't say, well, on my Facebook, that's just me being crazy, but on my fan page, I'm all professional. You have to really stream back. This is the age where you have to have a Facebook page or a Twitter page or any kind of social media where you might have to have an alias if you want to be a little crazy, but have your professional page that shows who you really are. And we really want people to know about you and see about you and talk about you. I think in our time, bridging the gap now, I'm looking at our elders. A lot of our elders aren't really into the whole technology thing. My mom always said, I don't have time for texting, just send me an email. Like, she's good with email, but texting right in front of her seems sometimes kind of difficult. I think how we can bridge the gap in our youth with our elders is teaching them how simple it is to just be connected. Teaching the people back in Liberia who have access to computers now, who have Blackberries and iPhones, how can we stay connected and possibly save some money? We have Skype, but I don't think a lot of people even use Skype to communicate with our families in Liberia and stay connected. where you can see them. You know, you have Facebook and websites that you can set up where you can post your family's generations, your cousins, your aunts, your births, your weddings, your deaths. Place where you can go and unite with your family, so you don't have to wait for 3 years from now when you go to Liberia and you see your family that you haven't seen in 25 years. We live in the technology age where you don't have to wait 5 years to see your family. You can see them now. Sometimes it's just taking the initiative in the family to say, you know what, maybe we're not IT people, but I know how to do a little something on Facebook, or maybe set up a website here where we can take our information and share it so we can stay connected, because we don't know when we're going to be together again, and we don't have to wait for that 5 or 10 year mark to go back home to see our family that has grown, because life is so short. And I think using that in a great positive way to connect our families, whether it's here in the US or in Liberia, let's find creative ways to stay connected on that end. But then let's find ways to use it in our businesses. What are we passionate about? For me, although I'm a fashion designer, I'm really passionate about going back to Liberia again and really taking head on these orphanages that are setting up on every corner in Liberia, in our country, where you have children who are not necessarily even orphans being dropped off daily. When I went back, that was the one thing that stayed with me. I remember having a breakdown in one of the orphanages. They didn't even have a door, but the only thing they asked me for was some mosquito nets. And I was like, wow, they need so much more, but yet that's all they're asking me for. So how can I use my name and my face or my Facebook or whatever it is that I have to put awareness to this and to help these children who deserve everything that I've got in my life? Why is it that they can't have that? So I've actually started a foundation to put towards, starting this with the U.S. through the Liberian government to talk about actually putting forth an adoption policy in our country so these children can actually have a chance to be adopted, and going through really creative ways on the internet to do it. GoFundMe is a place where I've actually connected with. It's a place where you can do fundraising. You can raise money from anybody. Anybody can donate to your cause. Just another creative way, technology-wise, to create something for a cause. You don't have to have money now to start a business. You can start your business and say, hey, everybody, I've been doing makeup, or I've been teaching dance for so long, but I want to start my own dance company, but I have no way to get this funds. My credit is shot. I don't have any investments, any investors who want to invest in me. This is a great platform for you to say, I can start my business and go like this. You can have your personal supporters. You can publicize it on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on your own personal websites, and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is who I'm affiliated with. And I'm just looking for either $1 to $20 to $300. And it slowly comes in, but it's another way for you to take what you want to do and what you love to do, what you're passionate about, and make money doing it for a good cause, but using the technology that our society has given us. I think as a Liberian person, it's really important for us to be careful how we represent ourselves. As you said, when you walk in the door, you don't represent just Cotonou. On Project Runway, I represented not just Liberia, Cotonou, I represented Africa. I represented every Black woman on television, and I felt like I had this huge pressure to show that as an African woman, as a Liberian woman, that I did have education, I did have good home training, I did have parents that loved me and cared about me, and I came from a great background to be proud of, and that what people watching the show knew of Liberia, which was all negative, I had to break those. Everything that they saw on CNN, on BBC, all these different avenues, I had to break all those stereotypes and represent who I was as a Liberian woman and show that we can be great, we can be talented, we do have great things that we do, and that we can do it in a way that we can be proud of and make our country proud. And I think every time you do something, you walk in a room, whether you're on your social media or not, that's what we represent. We represent our country, and we have a beautiful country that has so much more than war, so much more than fighting. So let's find ways that we can use our social media and our technology now to show that in Liberia. We were represented at the Olympics, Nobody really heard too much about it, but I made sure to stay up all night and find that one picture of that sprinter just to prove that we were there. It's like, hey, we were there, Positive role models, and finding other people that are doing things technology-wise, social media-wise that are great. So I've actually, mentioned a few, but like Face Africa, huge organization. helping to bring clean water to Liberia. Saran Kaba-Jones, she's somebody that I totally admire. I support her. She's somebody that I'm following on Twitter. I'm supporting on Facebook. Those are the people that I want to be affiliated with. The youth that I look at, somebody my age who's doing great things, who one day will be giving her humanitarian awards because she's done so much in her youth to build up. Find those role models, even if you don't know them. Post those on your Facebook pages. Let people know that as Liberians, young or old, that we're doing great things and we are doing things that we can be proud of. And how can you, sitting right here today, change your view now on your pages today? Who you can delete that's making you look a little bit less unprofessional, who you can follow that's going to make you look a little bit more determined and accomplished. So keep that stuff in mind, and as we sit down and break down the groups, think of ways that you can, bring a cause that you've been passionate about that maybe you thought you couldn't do before. A lot of things in my life I've accomplished I never thought I could do, but sometimes you just have to step out on faith, listen to everybody up here and know that we all have a story, we all come from the same beginnings. Everybody here come from the same beautiful, small, what they call a third world country, but we're doing great things and we can do greater things. But starting with social media, starting with the technology, the one place that somebody can go to instantly and find out who you are, that shows that as Liberian youth, we're going somewhere. We're the future of our country. When President Steve is gone and the next person is voted in, we're going to have many, many, many more years of elections, but how can we change the future of our country and using social media to help that? For me, it's showing the positivity, I think, starts first. Changing somebody's opinion of who I am through my social media, my technology that I'm using to change your mind about what Liberia is and who a Liberian woman is. So think about that. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys soon about how we can do more. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. I go so many places and I travel and you get a lot of accolades, but I think when you get it from your own people, that means more. Because going on the show, I never thought about being a role model or talking to people about what I did in my future or my past or my present. But when you have the African community reach out to you, it's amazing. But when Liberian people come to you and say, thank you for making us proud, or thank you for showing the light on what we're going through, and thank you for, just keeping moving forward. Moving forward, the war is gone. We have to move forward and move to the future of Liberia, and it's so bright. And I'm so happy to be a part of it, and I look forward to all of you being a part of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fatimamolu.
Great job. All the speakers are really well. We're supposed to be having lunch right now. The president is on his way. Can I ask the time? Do you have an idea? Show me. Like you're in time. So we're going to break into groups, but before we do that, do you guys have color-coded cards? Everyone have one of these color-coded, not the white ones. It has to be colored. No, not you guys. You guys. So yes, we all have color cards? Okay, so this was going to happen with the cards. Each one of those cards represents a speaker that's on stage. So if you have that card, we have 4 different places on the wall. So you're going to, after lunch, you're going to go into groups. And each one of your speakers are going to be heading that group of discussion. So in the group, we're going to be discussing the issues, the solutions, and the next step. And then after your group discussion, you're going to choose a member from that group. And once it's solved, to report on what you guys discussed to the general audience. Okay? So we'll make sure that we all have a card. You identify yourself with your group. We're going to have lunch, and we're going to come back in the room directly into the sections, and then after we commence back to the general audience. Is there anything that I'm missing?
Yeah.
Yes, you guys don't go after it. You look at your other program. You go later on. His issue is relevant after the discussion. Thank you.
That's why we have the program, bro.
Yeah. So, officially, once you have a card, you're on lunch break right now. Well, our lunch is not yet, but
Like she don't know what she's doing. She's parked up.
to know someone that doesn't have it already.
You know what I mean? Why you questioning me?
Exactly.
Some people are illiterate.
The first and foremost thing we came up with. Go ahead.
Next, we talk about the educational industry rate in Liberia, 70%. At some point, everybody might find it disturbing. I'm a little nervous. I don't do this a lot. The funny thing is, I function a lot better in a smaller group than I am functioning up here.
You're doing good.
About that 70% rate, we talk about it, and everybody seems to have the same problem on their mind. What can we do to change that rate? And one of the things we talk about, which sums up our entire presentation, our entire finding, is having a structure to help develop and put people, the right people in the right place, to help drop this rate down. Yeah, our actual goal is some point to see this rate down to probably about 20%. And the thing about structure, again, we pointed out having the right people in the right place, making the right decision, but then not just educated people, but educated people with morality. That's what we talk about. So you can be educated, but with no morality to make the right decision to influence your community, we'll be right back there. You should be making individual decisions as opposed to decision for your entire community or country. The next one.
Like awareness, nation awareness, like we all have to be aware of what's going on in our surroundings. Like for example, the stress on that, educate, the people, and also like don't just get educated for yourself, but also share and like even I think your name is George, right, George? You had a really great input about how you said with your friend. You wanted to hang out with people in your circle that was educated as well, and that was not below you or above you, that you can say, I'm proud to say he's a Liberian, but he's also educated and he's on that level. So nation awareness, we have to be aware of what's going on in our community. So.
That was the wrong point, though.
Last but not least, we talk about the gap, which was the biggest gap we are aware of between the educated Liberian or former education and the native man. There's always been a gap where we emphasize that more that being native or being from the interior means you're not educated and you do not belong to society and you're not part of certain decision making. And we feel that people who are educated have a responsibility to close that gap, because you've been given the knowledge to see how other countries, other societies bridge that gap, confront conflicts, and resolve it based on what you've learned. So we feel that gap, that's something that we have to work on as Liberia together to cut that gap out of setting the bar between being a native man and being a man from Monrovia, or being somebody from LU, and being somebody who haven't been to school. So something that we have to address to get people involved in bridging that gap between the native and the LU.
Yeah, and another thing about building the gap is you can't just put a person in a position and say, oh, you can go ahead and do this. You have to earn it. You have to earn it and have the education to back it up too. And that goes back to the structure. We need to have a structure. Africans, like their government needs to be run on structure. Don't copy other people's structure, or Nigerians and Ghanaians, Liberian. You have to have your own Liberian structure and follow that.
Yeah.
Don't, it goes right back to the structure and how we can come us together and bring the native and establish a native and, we man. Yeah, but yo. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys are true group of education people. they educated us more. At this point, you guys did an amazing job. So we have 5 minutes each presenter, correct? Just to reinforce that, we'd like to invite Dr. Simmons' health group up to present.
Come on down, guys. Or at least got one extra person, so he's not alone.
You can come up so we can see you.
Good job. Good job.
Trust me.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah. Yo, can you can I come up?
He's from the military. You don't need a mic.
Trust me, I don't need a mic. Thank you. Well, we talk about the mental health aspect. Specifically, we focus on PTSD. We threw numbers out so everyone can actually really see what we're talking about. Dr. Simmons put it up there for everyone to see, but 47% of all Liberians have some form of PTSD. And that's astounding when you actually think about the numbers. You know, you're talking half of the population, right? But what do you do about that? Right? First thing we came up with is an education base, right? You want to educate your people starting at a very early age. Right? It starts with the future of Liberia and the future leaders like everyone here and everyone else back in Liberia and in the United States. Right? But you can't educate someone without resources. With some of the resources, you got to start with yourselves. Start with yourselves, contribute to your country. We're all contributing today, tomorrow, and every other day in the future. You contribute and you give back, whether it's in the communities here or it's in the communities in Liberia, because we're all Liberians no matter where we go. And every day that's what it's about. It's about the generation and the future of the country, but we can't forget the past. Alright? So with that, with you, Alright? So educate. You educate with resources, and it makes your people aware. Being aware of what's going on and being aware of your surroundings is the most important thing. Alright? How many, if I may, by show of hands real quick, how many knew that this was such a serious problem before we even got here today? Alright? Well, now everybody is aware. Alright? So you can start with the awareness, the resources, and the education. With that, we wanted to empower people. Alright? Empower amongst yourselves. Talk to your family. Talk to your family members. Alright? We don't know how people feel about this. There is this sort of type of stereotype that comes with mental health. But you know what? We've all gone through it. We've all had our days. So it's important for us to start with the awareness, all right? But what more can be done, all right? We need leaders that lead every day, all right? One of the suggestions that came up was you start with the government. The government can officially endorse the disorder of PTSD and the symptoms that come along with that, all right? We talked about sponsoring, providing scholarships. This is a huge aspect. You know, you got teachers going over to China, you've got people coming to India, vice versa. You start with the education of the young folks. I don't know if people know this, but Liberia is the fastest growing country between the ages of 18 and 40. Alright? Y'all doing great things out there, so you start with the scholarships and the opportunities. You give people the opportunities and the resources, and I guarantee they'll do great things. Right? With the endorsement, alright, one of the biggest things is radio. Right? You put a radio ad out there, LWA, 94.5, Unmil, and you get the word out. Not every Liberian may have social media, not every Liberian may have a cell phone, but I'm going to bet everyone has a transistor radio. Right? Whether they're listening to soccer, I'm not quite sure, but you put it out there for everyone to hear. Right? But you also have to concentrate. You want to concentrate specifically where the problem lies, and that's everybody. So you want the Liberians in the diaspora, the youth, the adults, essentially everybody. Alright, it's something that everyone's going to deal with, and you have to start. So start somewhere, whether that be your home, a friend, wherever, but it starts with you, and it'll end with someone else, because everyone has to be involved in order to really tackle this issue. Alright? And then one of the last things we talked about was maybe putting a face to it. Alright? In America and other countries, you always have like a famous person. Maybe a football player for the United Way. Maybe, you know, Angelina Jolie with UNICEF. Right? So putting a face to it might allow people to actually relate to, you know, the problem that's going on. But there's one thing that we ended with, but it all comes back to the individual. And that putting a face on it could be you, or even myself. It doesn't have to be anybody. It can be somebody. Woo!
That was beautiful. Thank you very much. At this point, we would like to call Mrs. Butcher Washington group up on culture. It must be a culture thing. Yep, they'll be mad because they ain't got culture on that. Fabulous 5.
I can take this right here. Yeah, that's easy. No, you can put it in here. You think she got it? Oh, yeah, okay,
Alright, so we're the culture group, and the first question from the beginning we asked ourselves was, how does culture stop growth? Back in Liberia, as Liberians, we have a certain way of doing things. Every day, wake up, you do something, you're used to it over and over and over. But when does culture stop growth? You can find Liberians everywhere in the US now, in Europe, and so forth. And we're traveling, getting experiences, learning new things. So in a sense, even though we have a culture that we should respect and appreciate, but that shouldn't hinder our growth, because culture can sometimes hinder growth. We talk about how our culture is really complex. Back in the day, people were running away from maybe having a country name or wearing your traditional clothing. But now you go back to people are wearing traditional clothing. You go to offices, they're wearing to offices, to churches, and places like that. So it's a good thing that we're not appreciating and embracing our culture, because it's very important. We also talk about how young people today will sometimes shy away from talking about Liberia because they say, oh, well, it's a third world country, we've been through so much, and all this civil war stuff that happened. So they shy away from it. But we shouldn't shy away from Liberia, because that's the history. You can't change that, but you can change the future. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how the parent-child relationship. For some of us, we've been here for a long time now, so we're used to the American culture and the way people do things here. But at the same time, we have to understand our parents grew up in Liberia, and they have a certain way of doing things. And we have to understand they are the adult, so we should be respectful at all times to them, no matter what, because they're the parent. But at the same time, the parent has to be willing to listen to the child. So it's kind of a two-way thing, not just a one-way thing. And so just,
All right. I think you all know my name, Joshua Bay. First of all, let me just say thank you to the organizing committee for putting this very important topic within this whole discussion today, culture. You know, nowadays you go to program, you know you have a culture, you have a health, education, the rest of it, but culture plays a lot in our life. And I so much appreciate it today that we can hear about culture. So one of the things I want us to grab from this room today, let us be proud as Liberian of our culture. You know, the speaker talked about giving back. Now I can't live in America and hear about American culture and hear about the Yankees and the Eastern Wall, and I can talk about my own country, Liberia, or rather shot on the table. So one of the things we want to recognize to the union today, recommend to the union rather, that the union be able to focus on our culture, the Liberian culture. Let us see how best we can adapt that within the union chapters, letting them know how important it is that our young people need to be educated on Liberian culture. We know that we have a diverse culture too. Coming to America, you gotta learn something new than the rest of it. So going back home, we should serve as an educator to tell the people back home, look, we have to learn something different in America. And I think it should be, important that we need to change our lifestyle. The way we did things in the past, we need to do something a little bit different, most especially in terms of health. So culture is very, very important. And to the committee, please let us put more attention to this. I too will take it back home to my own chapter and make sure that our young people know more about a country like Liberia. Thank you.
I've never really held a mic before, now I'm fine. Well, I'm going to talk about culture in itself. Well, I believe Liberia has a great, rich culture. It has history. The good things and the bad things make Liberia, right? The war was there, but we also have the music, we have the tradition, we have the clothes, we have all the wonderful things that make us Liberians, right? So I believe that the most important thing that makes us want to go back, to make things better is understanding it and appreciating it. You have to actually love your country. You have to be proud of it. You have to be proud of everything. The war, you have to be proud of it. You have to be proud of the good things and bad things. You have to know they happen, but they're what makes you Liberian. That's why you go back. If you don't understand and love that, you meet negative people along the way and you get discouraged. So But that's the first thing. You have to appreciate, love, understand your culture. Now, culture is many things. Culture is, how you live. Culture is how you dress. Culture is your music. Culture is your history. But most importantly, culture is the principle. Culture is, the deep thoughts, the mindset behind what is being directly implemented. Like, when we were young, your parents beat you half the time. You don't really understand why. But the principle behind it is that they want to discipline you. So, when we come over to other places with people, librarians will be all over the place, Afghanistan, America, everywhere. The key is carrying that principle and implementing it in a different situation. You don't have to implement it the exact way. You can't come over here and start, beating your child with a switch. Because some people will come to your house and you'll be surprised. But you have to kind of figure out how to implement that same principle of discipline, but in a different way. So that's about it for culture. Thank you so much for listening.
For someone that hadn't held a mic before, guys.
You were stunning.
At this point, we have Mrs. Kato Momolu's group present on technology and social media.
We had a lot of great ideas, but we thought, because we're talking directly to this group and how we can gap everybody together in this group, we need to start with it here. So I think education and awareness to our parents within the organization, talking to them about what their children are doing on Facebook, Twitter, name all of them and let them know, because like I said, a lot of the older generation have no idea about a lot of this stuff and they shy away from it. But I think we need to make them have that conversation so they can be more aware of what their children are doing and the young adults are doing, and they can be able to talk to them within their households. So as a community, let's educate the parents, and then from there you can educate the kids and tell them about all the things we discussed earlier, like what you say and what you post and everything that's on there. Just tell them straight out, it's there forever. It'll come back to haunt you in 5, 10, or 15 years when you're looking for a job, when you're trying to get a loan. Sometimes you have to make it really raw for people to get it, but break it down like that to educate these children so that they know when they're putting themselves out here, it's not just for fun. Find a positive way to use these social medias to, do better in your lives and your communities, etc. And then fundraising within the community. There's some households who don't have computers at home. So it's kind of hard for somebody to use technology to advance if they don't have that access. So fundraising in the sense of for people who have used computers and laptops, even smartphones, that they can donate to families that have several children that can't afford to actually, give them their own computer. Within the community here, you guys can really have this fundraising aspect of it. Reach out to organizations in the community to see who can donate these things, and give it to the family so that they can have that outlet besides going to a library or going to an internet cafe. I think that's really important. Start being proactive within each other in this organization and outside about who we friend, who we follow, who we support, and start supporting more positive Liberian role models like Saran, who's doing Face Africa, and just so many other people that are doing great things. We have one right here who's doing great stuff he wants to promote in Liberia. Finding out who these people are in our community and supporting them, showing who their face is, showing what they're doing, and showing the light that, hey, we're going to have this page, we're going to have our website, but we're going to support positive images in our community to help our youth know that they can take the same road. Which one? Okay, definitely. And posting everything on the website, linking it all together so that there's one message that goes out on all pages. So if you say one thing on Facebook, it's going to be on your Twitter, it's going to be on your website, and you have this one voice that's consistent. I think the last one we had was what? Enforcing positive images used on our personal pages and making a stance against negativity. There's so much negative things on the internet. I think if we stand against it together, it can stop. We don't have to tolerate everything that's negative online, but I think if we want our youth to really interact and use this media to do good things, we have to stand against the bad things. And I think it just takes one person to say, you know what, I'm going to block you publicly, and I'm gonna tell another person to block you, and et cetera, and take the negative things out of our community. But within here, support positivity and show them the other way that we can use technology and social media to do good here in America with our youth, and hopefully forward it to Liberia. Anybody have any last words?
Just one thing I would add is just for instant gratification, where we can not frustrate the organization. I've already created like a Facebook page. That yes, anyone? Yeah. We have a Facebook. Okay. So what we talked about in group was that having that Facebook page where people can like it. Now what we're having do's and don'ts. Say when you allude to all the negative things and all the positive things, and have that where everyone in this group here today can do on Facebook, on your Facebook page, and then like the Facebook page. That way, we will be, if you like it, your friends will see it and they will like it as well.
Okay, I had a great group. We had a really good time doing this, but basically positivity on our technology.
Something going on, you might need help. You can say, hey, I'm doing this right now, whatever it is. So if anyone in the audience has questions, comments about education or health, social network, whatever, wants to share something with the audience or anybody else.
Something is wrong with the mic.
Education, because if you leave from third grade, get into 8th grade based on your age, you're going to lost essence. So at the end, you start to 7 to 12 because it's mandatory, for the mission college, you lost essence. And I think that is affecting our own community. So what's your own reflection on the problem?
You said it in your question. So what I say, the war years can really tell us that Liberia won't die. And I'll give you an example. I went to all boys school, St. Patrick's. They had a structure. There was no way you go there, you walk away, and you can go to any country and pass any school. We knew what it meant to have 74 and bring it home. It's a field grade. So the structure. We saw that structure also in demonstration. We had the late, what was the name, the principal for demonstration? Yes. If you went through her, you know you went through school. So we know the war years kind of destroyed us. People grew older in refugee camps, no school, all the shame, they bought their ways, bought grades, and they got into classes that they couldn't actually attain. And these are people in leadership today. Think about it. So we are already a broken nation, and these are the people we have to deal with. Now the question to us, when these people come over here, like my young friend, he played hard to make sure that he would learn. So it's up to, I think, Mrs. Blue said it well. What can we do as a community to help educate the young people, to mentor them? Emmanuel and I play soccer. Emmanuel does not even know much about football. When he has a problem, we work with him. George is over there. When George has a problem in finishing out his criminal justice class, he comes from the soccer field. I say, I will take my laptop, we will play the soccer game, and then from there we'll do the homework. And we'll do the homework right on the soccer field. So these are things that we all can do. And that's the only way to do it is to be in community and encourage each other.
Sometimes people like that's a different as a come together and actually help each other. Because a lot of Liberians, the ones I've seen sometimes, they're embarrassed to come. If they need help, they're embarrassed to do it.
They hear the word American Liberian, they don't know how that was even formed. How do you tell it unbiasedly? So that's the question we ask ourselves. And I believe to understand our war was to understand that if Liberia was the victim, then we all are victims. And I think we start from there as the premise.
So for me, it starts with mental health. Mental health, that's hard. No, your question, to repeat your question, it was how do we...
How do you go forward when essentially every person plays both roles, the victim and the survivor?
Yeah.
Because on one hand you have to be sensitive, on the other hand, the story has to be told educated and articulate. So how do you proceed with that?
I mean, for me, you know, I think arts must hit the nail on the head as far as education goes. Another thing is just an awareness. I think I'm constantly made aware every day that I am both a survivor and a victim of the war, and when I encounter younger people, and even adults, you know, I have that discussion with them. For me, creating an awareness around this issue is a first step towards actually doing something about it. So that's just a baseline. I don't want to go on a dissertation, so I'll let other people talk.
Okay, for me, as you speak on history, I think history definitely repeats itself. As Masa stands over there, she has a great organization, CITO, that talks about knowing your past in order to know how you move forward in your future. I think being a victim and a survivor, one thing that I've noticed about Liberians here and in Liberia is that Liberians are resilient. So regardless of what situation we went through, we are here today. We're going to learn how to continue to be survivors. The survivors are also going to learn how to help and improve the system. But being a victim and a survivor, human nature, it has a lot to do with history. So the education and understanding how you begin to move forward and educating yourself to do so, I think, is key. Understanding the health portion of things that comes from your belief and what you've learned in your culture. Understanding what's going on with the technology, also education, where you are now. But as far as the victim and survivor deal, I think it's history. History usually repeats itself, so educate yourself and know your history to know how you're going to move forward.
I think communication is key, telling your story. When she was speaking earlier about, you know, people who have certain things wrong with them, they don't want to talk about it, they're almost embarrassed, they avoid crowds, they avoid people that share that experience with them. I think sometimes just coming out and just spelling it out and saying, you know, this is what I went through. It might not be what you went through. I wasn't in Liberia for the war, but it doesn't mean it didn't affect me the same because I was here. So I think telling your story and then telling your survivor story. Yes, I went through this, but I survived it. I achieved this because I stepped out on faith and I left my past in the past. I haven't forgotten it. It's a part of me and it makes me who I am. It makes me stronger. It makes the small things that we experience in America not seem so big. When you know what you have to go through in Liberia, what you have to experience during that time. I don't sweat the small stuff. And I think the more you talk to, especially people in my age group who are in their 30s, who think, you know, their whole future was in front of them before the war, and then when the war happened, they lost so much and they just gave up. They hear, you know what, I'm in America, this is not my country, I can't be who I am. I don't think so, I'm paying taxes in this country. So I will claim my American dream by way of Monrovia, Kingsway for, you know, real life. It's just something you have to speak your story. And I think, especially with me being on the show, so many people I went to school with, like, you know what, thank you for just showing me you can still do it. And that's all it is, just speaking. You never know whose life you're gonna affect by just speaking your truth.
Just to add on to that, I would say everything that has been said already in terms of education, obviously in terms of, you know, PTSD and all the other psychological issues that are related to the war, and also in terms of storytelling, the power of storytelling and the power of narratives. But I think to add on to that, definitely we have to deal with the fundamental issues of justice, retributive justice and restorative justice as well. So I mean, we have to definitely, you know, try to come to terms with the idea, the fundamental idea that yesterday's executioners have become today's leaders. There's a fundamental contradiction in that, and we have to come to terms with that as a society, or else it's going to be very difficult to heal, because that is at the very foundation of any meaningful healing process. So.
I lost track of things. So he's going to go first.
You're passionate about as far as, you know, addressing your mental health and do it. So a lot of times when we engage ourselves and really involve ourselves in things that are passionate, that we're passionate about, we're able to kind of take our minds off of the things that we're struggling from. You know, whether, you know, there are lots of behavioral things that people do, again, individually, like some people exercise, some people sing, some people dance, some people play not full. So, you know, things along that line. But also in terms of just more from a country's perspective, you really need to, we talked about it, I think in my mental health group here, we talked about just being educated around what the real issues are, and also finding support system, you know, to help the entire country. You know, we're not just looking at, oh, how can we help Mary Jean down the street? How can we help everyone? How can we help this community? And really looking at it more globally that way. Other things, other things that we can do as far as helping everyone is really, besides awareness, mental health is not just a genetic thing, it's also economical, it's also socio-economical, right? So we need to address some of those issues that are fundamental to that as well. So, again, I hope I answered your question.
And the next question is Mrs. Washington. We talk about culture a lot in this format, and outside of Liberia is Liberian culture, and within Liberia it's different. There's a huge gap between different tribes, different people in different parts of the country. What would you recommend for us to bridge that gap in Liberia? Because outside of Liberia, everybody is Liberian and understands the culture. Within there, even during the war and after the war, we experience this problem and a huge gap of difference. What can we do to respect that down? Or what would you recommend as far as how you approach it?
I think first and foremost, we have to respect the fact that we have all of these unique cultures within Liberia that actually make us Liberian and have this one sort of idea once we leave Liberia. With the culturation that I spoke about earlier, I think this is where us who are outside, mainly in the U.S., we can look at the U.S. society here. So what you see with the culturation is a little bit different when you look at the European population. So when you look at people who are from Ireland or Germany or England or something like that in America, they immigrated here too. They're not originally from here, but what you notice is that they all pretty much look alike. Been here for a longer set of time, so it's easy to say we are American as one. So what you see nowadays in the recent centuries, you see a lot of people who are from those European countries, they are considered American. So we who come from Liberia and Mexico and Vietnam and all of that, we still call ourselves Liberian Americans, African Americans, Mexican Americans. So taking that idea from here, what we've learned, to bridge the gap now and go back into Liberia. How do you get the Liberian to love, of all tribes, to love his or her country to the point where they believe that we are one melting pot and that all of the tribes are equally important, respected, and make up the entire country, regardless of if you are Bassa, Lama, Pele, Gisi, you Americo, Liberian, you don't know where you're from, you're just in Liberia, but you're Liberian. So there's that whole idea of saying, now we are one, and all of these cultures make us one as Liberian. All of these cultures will be respected. And we all make sure that that is done. So just think about that idea that you're in America. You have a lot of people who are considered Americans, and then we have to put a handle in front of us being American. It's the reverse. It's bridging that gap.
That we have to deal with when it comes to issue of culture is to draw out the tension, static versus dynamic. Because the belief that culture is static can be held mainly by conservative, uneducated people. I use the word uneducated. The more you lack that formal education, there's always a sense that what you have, you're not willing to share it. So we should be aware of that. But we know that the great United States today we are in is about culture movement being progressive. So you and I will go with the tension. We hear the long story of the American, Liberian, the Congo. That's past. The real tension, as a realist, is between us who grew up here, our kids, who want to go back to Liberia with a new sense of adapted culture. How do our fellow Liberians on the ground receive you? That's the true tension. And we can only make that as a national issue by talking about it and throwing it out there. We are a dynamic culture, and we have to speak it out and spill it out and do whatever it takes so that it remains in the psyche of our people.
All right. Well, I think first of all, let me just commend Dr. Gay for speaking on education and for the job that you're doing as an individual, helping one or two kids within the Chicago area. I think that should be our responsibility as educators, young Liberian educators coming to this country and learning, to be able to help our brothers and sisters coming back home. I'm speaking from the point, I really don't have a question for you, but speaking from the point where a brother 4 years ago woke up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and decided to help the less fortunate kids coming from our country and other African countries in Worcester. And today we have a very big community called the African Educational Community, which all the guys volunteer the services working for right now. We have over 120 kids, and 75% of them are all Liberian kids. Today, the state of Massachusetts is totally involved with it. So I think it's something that we as young people and part of this union can also look into that, because that's how people measure your education. How well you're willing to give back, not just getting the education and making the money for yourself and not giving back to society. So I think it's something that we all can learn from, because this will be a very serious problem if we can attack it right now for the young children that are coming back home and putting them into 8th, 9th grade, and you really don't have any mentor, because the Worcester Public School had a very serious problem with it. Kids were falling back. They had to take them into special need classes. They thought they were going crazy, as we put it. That's where mental health come into play. What's wrong with them? They of this age, by this time they should be able to read and write and the rest of it. And since it's getting to be, the kids now, we have had almost majority of the kids. This year alone, we had an appreciation cook-up for our graduates, and we have almost over 10 some more graduates in Worcester from high school, from kindergarten down to college, coming up from school, and ACE is doing extremely well. I really hope other communities and states can look into that and see how best they can help the young people. That's a very serious problem. Thank you.
Yay! I had a couple of things going on, but the most important thing, I just want to go over what you said in education. I was in Liberia in April, and when I went there, I had an opportunity to visit some of the campuses, and I was in Pinkville, driving to Pinkville, and I noticed during the daytime, there's a lot of young men in the streets. And when I got to Liberia, I was warned about it. If you go in, you drive into Pinkville, you put your...
A lot about education, we talk a lot about health, we talk a lot about technology and media, and we talk a lot about culture. So what I want to do is to give you a presentation that will somehow encapsulate everything that we've talked about. I know that's a very tough task, but I'll try to do my best. So in doing that, I want to take you into a Liberian political science class. Just imagine, I got a Liberian political science class. And this class is not like a stool, okay? So what is a stool? A stool is kind of like a gravy that has one color, right? So this class is like a salad bowl. A salad bowl always has different ingredients in it. Yeah, like I said, a salad bowl always has different ingredients into it, right? Or better yet, you can say my presentation. Better yet, you can say my presentation in this Liberian political science class is like a tabagi. Who are here likes tabagi? Right. So, tabagi has the tteokbokki, typical tteokbokki soup has different ingredients into it, right? Sometimes you have chicken, sometimes you have dry meat, sometimes you have bone, you have everything. You got the oil, then you got the, you know, the tteokbokki soda, you know, and stuff like that. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Even though I'm doing a presentation in political science, but this political science class, you know, has a lot of different ingredients in terms of psychology, right? It has moral philosophy, it has criticism, obviously it has some anthropology, and even more so it has education, what I call moral education. Okay, so that's the presentation I'm going to do today, okay?
Can you sing for us?
Sorry?
Can you sing a song for us?
Well, no, I can't sing a song, but just from looking at artifices and stuff like that, what I can try to do while he's trying to fix it, is just to take you back, you know, to my time in high school. You know, I went to Tottenham, Go Cardinals, yes, Tottenham, Go Cardinals. And you know, Tottenham is known for being very political, right? So at Tottenham, we used to have all kinds of battle cries. Like, for instance, there's one that goes like this, Zekwe, 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 Zekwe. Zekwe. Amala wetu. Amala wetu. I know this kind of like sounds like some kind of language from what? Amala wetu.
South Africa.
Exactly. South Africa. There you go, right there. That was something we, you know, we appropriated in Liberia, you know, like during those days when we were trying to at least use our you know, our sense of moral disposition, our political voice, if you like, to bring about change in society. Until I graduated and left home, and even more so until 1989 when the war began. So we were in Liberia trying to bring about change in our days back, you know, in high school. Okay, so that's just an example of, you know, some of the battle cries we used to do. I know there are more. There's some guys that are so good in that thing, man, you will not believe it. But anyway, let me get this. Yeah, this is bring technology, right? Yeah.
You get some trouble music.
Trouble music.
Well, the interesting thing is I want to follow this because I want to be all over the place and stuff like that. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I know exactly. Yeah. I know, right?
No, you got it wrong.
I hope you take that in.
Can you tell us, I mean, I missed you earlier, but can you tell us a little bit about, besides your
Yeah.
I missed it. Oh, that's
Sorry? Yeah. I live. Right, okay, so, yeah. You still want to?
No, we can wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know. That's why technology is so good. Right. You just gotta use it, right? Yeah. You use the other computer and it's out there. Or it was charging
Other computer. Yeah. Hey, Chuck is still recording too. Ah, that's not record. I'm recording blank page. Read it first.
Culture, right? We talk about culture. And so we talk about all those issues and we talk about pleasures and goods that we can derive from those areas of our lives in terms of education, for instance. Education is a pleasure or is a good, for instance, in the classical Aristotelian sense, right? Aristotle. I will talk to you a lot about Aristotle. So we talk about We talk about education, we talk about health. Health is also a pleasure, and it's a good. To be healthy is a good, right? And to being healthy can also be a virtue as well. So those are the kinds of issues that we talk about in the context of moral leadership and development. Okay, next. All right, so what you want to ask, well, why are we talking about this? Because we could have been talking about a lot of different topics, right? But why are we taking time at this point in time to talk about the moral issues involved in education, right? The moral issues involved in leading, right? Not just leading, but following as well. Because, you know, as the saying goes, good leaders make good followers. Good followers make good leaders. Like, some people often say, you make the leaders that you deserve. Okay, you make the leaders that you deserve. Because the leader is a manifestation, the leader is an anatomy of everything that a group stands for. Okay? Both good and bad as well. Okay? So, and the reason why we pay some attention to this topic, again, is because we say that the breakdown of leadership, right, as a result of the moral crisis, for instance, that what we have in Nigeria today, is because leaders and both followers are culpable in that. That means because leaders and followers aren't paying attention to certain values, certain virtues. And then, well, you know, we have economic, we have cultural, right? And we have political consequences from the breakdown, right, of leadership and the breakdown of specifically moral leadership. There are cultural consequences of that, there are economic consequences of that, there are, you know, educational consequences, there are a host, a slew of consequences associated with the breakdown of good leadership, effective leadership, okay? And then, because we have this phenomenon where there's a breakdown in moral leadership in the country, governance has become very difficult. It has become very difficult to govern Liberia. It has become very difficult to govern Liberian organizations as well, right? So because when we talk about the issue of morality, the issue of moral and ethical dispositions that leaders ought to have, this is not just an issue that confronts Liberia as a country, right? But you can break that down into Liberian organizations as well, okay? All right, and another thing is there's not enough data out there on these kinds of issues. Obviously, there's a lot of data on leadership, right? You check the literature on leadership, the academic literature on leadership, there's a slew of data, okay? But really, there's not specifically data on some of the reasons for governance and leadership failures in Liberia. So that's what I'm trying to do, to try to fill in some of the gaps that exist, both academically and also in our practical lives as well, by this presentation. This presentation, I'm hoping that it will constitute a chapter in the book that I'm working on right now. Okay, next. All right, so obviously, is that the second one right? All right, so we've talked about the idea of the breakdown of leadership and breakdown of governance in Liberia, all right, as a result of the moral crisis, right? But we also want to talk about solutions. I mean, how can we identify effective solutions to that problem? So we say, well, first of all, the solutions exist. There were a whole idea of, you know, the toboggi, you know, cassava leaf, and etc., as analogs of some kind of methodology that I'm using, right? Social science methodology that takes into consideration both moral philosophy, psychology, developmental psychology, and so that, you know, I can build some kind of picture, some kind of, you know, synthesis that will give us some kind of complete picture, or a picture that will be much more closer, right, to completeness in terms of how we can both diagnose this problem, right, and how we can identify effective solutions. Because it's one thing to diagnose a problem to a situation that we've been talking today a lot
about some of the problems that exist in our education, the inadequacies that exist in our educational networks, our educational systems, our educational policies as well, and some of the problems that exist in our health delivery systems and all that. We can talk from now to Judgment Day about those issues. But if we are not prepared in terms of both the intentionality and coming up with all kinds of public policy and practical ideas that help us to address those problems, we are just wasting our time. So the idea being theory without practice doesn't make any sense. Okay? So now the reason why I'm doing this again, or part of the reasons why I'm doing this, is to help to provide some clarity. Because we have to be clear about what's the right way to be, what we ought to do to put us on the right path. We have to be clear both in terms of the conceptual level and at the practical level as well. Okay, so how can we bring about some kind of conceptual clarity to this problem, the problem of the lack of morality, if you like, for lack of a better term, or yet a better term, the lack of an ethical disposition in how we approach the whole idea of leading, right? And the whole idea of followership as well. Because the idea here is that leadership presupposes, effective leadership presupposes effective followership as well, okay? Next. All right, so now to identify some kind of methodology that makes sense, that works, I had to go back into classical moral philosophy in terms of Aristotle. You know, Aristotle wrote this book, I think in Greek it's called Ethica Nicomacheia. Now, translation, Nicomachean Ethics. So the Nicomachean Ethics has a lot of books to it. But I used for one book too, because there's so many books out there. And it was just sufficient for me. But basically what I was trying to do is to try to see how I can use Aristotle's virtue ethics, right? So virtue ethics is a branch of ethics. So it makes sense to me in terms of how I can bring some clarity to this issue. All right. So what are some of the things that virtue ethics place, emphasis on? Virtue ethics talks about what? Moral character, right? Not necessarily the right action. So you take an action, like for instance, if you like to have a lower cholesterol, right? So we say the idea so much is not having lower cholesterol being the right action, right? But how can that become a part of my character? How can the whole idea of me having a lower cholesterol, knowing that there are certain practical steps I need to take that will result in a lower cholesterol, and lower cholesterol being a virtue as a result of that, right? So what can I do to bring that virtue, to make that virtue into reality, transform that virtue into reality? And obviously, it's a very complicated question. It's a very, very difficult question. It's a problematic question. Okay? So, and then the idea of what kind of person I want to be, or what kind of person I ought to be, or what kind of person should I be? What kind of person should one be? That's a very fundamental question. Why are you here today? You could have been somewhere else. What is the opportunity cost of being here today? The opportunity cost for you of being here obviously might be less than the opportunity cost of being somewhere else. That's the reason why you chose to be here. Well, that's a very economic calculus. Okay? Well, you might say, okay, I don't want to, start comparing ends on the basis of, what benefit I can get out of it, economic benefit, but I want to be obviously concerned about me, my character, who I am, is how can I be, a good person, all right? So what allows me to lead the kinds of lives that I want to lead, right? Which is obviously the good life. Everybody wants to lead a good life. Now, how we define a good life? What is the mechanism of achieving that good? G-O-D, good, the good life. We might, have different paths toward that good life. We may have different ways of defining that good life. But here, in terms of the restore, we have a specific way of defining that good life. And it's part of what I'm trying to do in this presentation. So, obviously, the good life, happiness. So what is happening?